Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Our webinar topic is Women in Tech, where today's college grads are applying. And before we get started, we wanted to cover a couple items. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to click on that little question icon in the GoToWebinar panel. You'll be able to ask questions during the presentation, and we'll be monitoring those throughout. But of course, we'll have time for questions at the end. The other question we always get throughout is if we will send a recording of this presentation, and the answer is yes. We will send a recording a couple hours after we finish today, so feel free to share that with your colleagues if they didn't get to attend today's session. With that, let's go over who you're hearing from today. So Katie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Katie Mooney. I'm the Director of Commercial Sales here at Handshake. My background is that I actually started by studying human biology. I was a pre-med at Stanford, and I actually just fell into finance kind of by accident while leading a mountain bike trip in Tahoe. That's a story for another day. But as I did that, I spent a handful of years in finance and bond trading, and also spent time in a private bank. Really, the finance sector fulfilled a lot of my academic desires, and that was really intellectually stimulating for me, but it didn't have the impact piece that I was looking for, and so that's why I ultimately switched over to work in ed tech. I found this amazing company called RaiseMe, where I had a huge, that was my big career growth job. I got to start there when the company was less than 20 people as one of their account executives, and really grew with that company over the years. RaiseMe helped students go from high school to college, and we really focused on the financial aid component of helping students understand the cost of college. So it was super fulfilling work. And that role, as I grew through RaiseMe, I spent time as the Director of Sales and then ultimately as the VP of Sales, which enabled me to come over here to Handshake, where we help students go from college to their first job. So very linear, high school to college and then college to their first job. And so I sit here today as the Director of Commercial Sales for Handshake.
Awesome. And my name is Kristen Ribeiro. Some of you may have heard from me before on other webinars or events you've attended with Handshake. My background is that I studied film and communication at UC Davis by Sacramento. I spent 2 years out of college in the entertainment and film industry and realized quite quickly that that was not for me, and have spent almost 10 years in the B2B technology space, ranging from larger ed tech companies like ProQuest to smaller high growth into larger startups like PagerDuty, now Handshake. My mission throughout my career in tech has really been to make an impact, and specifically as a marketer, I think that just helps me be better at my job, and when I can attach myself to the mission and product, it makes me a better marketer. So that's sort of the progression that I've found within moving to PagerDuty, Social Chorus, and now Handshake. Handshake, as everyone hopefully knows here, we help students get their first, second, third even job, and help employers like you build a better, more diverse team. So I'm really able to match that B2B marketing playbook with a company that serves a true mission. And you'll see Katie and I are reviewing our backgrounds because it's really relevant to the topic at hand today, and specifically as we think of early career women in tech and the progression that they could follow. So with our session today, here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking through. We'll give a couple of sort of stats and a picture of the state of the world or state of women in the workplace today. We'll go through an overview of Handshake's network, and that'll lead us into debunking 5 myths, specifically pulled from data in Handshake's network around women in tech. With that, we will leave you with some key takeaways and examples of how employers are sort of tackling this challenge today. And then, like I mentioned, we will have time for live Q&A at the end, but of course, feel free to ask questions throughout. So like I said, just to start us off with a couple of stats and the state of the world, this quote shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. It's a regularly used Harvard Business Review quote, and it's no surprise that diverse teams perform better, whether that's gender, race, thought, background. We really like to think of diversity at Handshake across multiple functions, and think about it not just at a company perspective, but a team perspective too, because we know that, certain teams can lean one way or the other, and it's very important to think about that diversity as it pertains to the team level and where the actual work happens, as well as the company level. And when we talk to young job seekers, these are the students and folks on our network, 18 to 22-year-old age group, they really use diversity and inclusion as a decision-making criteria. So it's very different from the criteria that was probably used 20, 30, 40 years ago, where you had folks staying in jobs a lot longer. This generation is actually seeking this out, and for you as employers, they want to know, what is it like to work there? And particularly as someone from an underrepresented group, what is their experience going to be at your company? We've also crossed a pretty amazing point in U.S. history, a historic employment milestone. And what this is showing you is a cutout from a Washington Post article that illustrates how prime age workers are now, the majority are underrepresented women, particularly Black and Latinx. And I think this is something we should definitely celebrate, but it's also something we should continue to push, and not just from a recruitment perspective, but think about the environments we're creating within companies in order to keep women and underrepresented groups there, happy, engaged. Again, this is a huge improvement, and you can see from the chart, it appears to be so, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I think we all need to kind of commit to what keeping underrepresented groups at your company looks like. Finally, before we look at what our network, how we can gain insights from our network, I wanted to share a couple points from our university partners and some trends that we're experiencing and learning about from the higher ed perspective. I think, it's important to know where we've come from and what the expectations are before looking forward about where we're going in the future of recruiting underrepresented talent. So number one, inclusive excellence and changing student demographics. I think we are all familiar with the fact that tuition has increased tremendously. There's a trend in how families are choosing schools that differed from the past, and how more low income, first gen, even students of color, kind of across the board, are attending universities and college than they ever have before. We're also just seeing an influx of students across schools over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we have to think about, the employer's responsibility in those changing dynamics as this new group of students move from that college to career path. The second trend here, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, this is something we've spoken about at length on Handshake webinars and in events before, but personalization at scale. Personalization is something that, from any consumer side to business side to candidate and recruiting side, everyone expects. Candidates expect this. I think employers expect this too. And students really are expecting that high-tech experience, lest employers seem irrelevant to them in this day and age. But I think the important thing to remember there is not to lose the personalized, high-touch, really one-to-one experience within recruiting. And we don't want to, when we're reaching out to candidates, and particularly candidates from underrepresented backgrounds, I know when I get reached out to on LinkedIn, I don't want to feel like I'm getting a mass blast that a recruiter is sending to 20 other candidates like me. Finally, culture adds. So the quality of candidate is obviously something that all employers look for, but the quality of experience is something that students look for. And I would say both higher ed institutions and students are getting savvier about how to discern and look for companies that not only recruit top talent, and that means top talent from whatever background, whatever school, but how they retain those candidates. Like I said before, that is a key piece of this. And so I think, as you all think through this, be proactive with answers to questions around what is the culture like, what are the unspoken rules here? How will I show up here? Will I be the only woman in a room full of men? That's something that I've definitely experienced time and again throughout my career. I think today's women candidates really expect that authenticity, and the more you can be upfront about that, the more trust you will garner with these students. So before we dive into the actual network, Handshake network, we wanted to do a quick poll and understand how the audience is finding underrepresented talent today. So with that, we are just going to put a quick poll up on the screen and allow you all to take a couple minutes to answer this poll, and we'll go over the results shortly. Okay, let's take a look at these results. So it looks by far and wide that engaging on-campus organizations is our top strategy here. We do see some around referrals, recruiting at MSIs, minority-serving institutions. I'd love to know, for those who selected other, and feel free to put it in the chat, I'd love to know what those other strategies you're employing are. And further in the presentation, we will talk through how some of the employers we work with are tackling this challenge. Some of it's similar, some of it's a little different. So thanks everyone for participating there. Great, and with that, I will turn it over to Katie to chat through our network.
Great, thanks, Kristen. So in the context of women in tech and, of course, more broadly, diversity and inclusion, I want to share a little bit about why Handshake is so engaged in this conversation. So Handshake broadly is an early talent network. We help students get their early jobs. So it's often their first internship or their first job out of college. And the reason that this is so relevant to the women in tech field and just diversity and inclusion broadly is because this early talent space is one of the areas where employers can really impact diversity in their organizations. And so it's a big focus for them, since this is the new people that they get to hire and then groom and then grow to be a part of their organization going forward. Some companies already do this really well, and often when we partner with these types of employers, they really want the data to prove it. And then others do this less well today. Often what we find is that recruiting teams care a lot about diversity and inclusion broadly, whether it's something that's being driven from senior leadership or just something they care about more emotionally, but they often need data to enable them to have productive conversations about it internally at their organizations. So let's talk about the landscape here. So this is what Handshake looks like today. We have over 5 million students, over 800 university partners, and over 400,000 employers that partner with us. But how do we get here? The old world of university recruiting really focused on this idea of going one by one as an employer to post your jobs to colleges. The reason why we did this, and you're all probably familiar with this concept of like your core school list. And how this came to be was that as companies, you might have a certain amount of budget that's given to you as you go to recruit on campus. And since that budget is not infinity, you end up having to pick where you spend it. In the old model, before Handshake existed, every single university had their own job board. And so as an employer, you used to have to go manually to a university's job board and post your job. And you would do that one by one by one. And some of you are probably sitting there nodding your head thinking, wow, that was a really rough time. There was a lot of manual work that went into that. And so it would be crazy to assume that you could post your job to over 2,000 universities, have a login for every single one. So what ended up happening is that employers said, okay, we can't be everywhere. Let's pick a handful of schools. And that's how the core school list was born. It really wasn't based on this idea that recruiters or companies thought, oh, there's only smart kids at this school. It really was based on the idea of efficiency and limited budget. And that's really where Handshake came to the picture. Because what ended up happening, the negative consequence of this old system was that only certain universities, and therefore only the students at certain colleges, were able to see employers' jobs. So if you went to a university where my company decided not to post the job, it was almost impossible for me to ever know that job even existed. So it created really a huge lack of inequality around access to this job market. So Handshake came in to say, we want to democratize this opportunity. We want to make sure that talent everywhere gets the opportunity to see these different roles. And we also want employers to be able to not have to only pick students from this select number of schools and be able to reach top talent nationally. What's happening here on this network is when you log into Handshake today, you actually then can put your job on there and you can select all the schools at one time or a large number of schools. And so you're dramatically increasing your access to talent by being able to participate here. What makes Handshake really unique, though, versus any other platform or any other student recruiting tool is this deep partnership that we have with the universities. Every single university that we partner with, every single student at that university is given a Handshake account. And the reason for that is that Handshake is actually the system of record for that university. It's where they store student data, and it's everything that the Career Center uses. So the Career Center on a campus, they're in Handshake all the time. It's how they're scheduling employers to come on campus. If students wanted to know what career fairs were coming up, they'd log into their Handshake to do that. If they were looking to schedule and participate in an on-campus interview, the students would do that on Handshake. So Handshake is really deeply integrated into this university college-to-career process. What comes from that then as an employer is that all these students are here, which means that this is where the employers come to actually engage with the universities and the students as well. So over 400,000 employers are using Handshake, as you can see, and over 100% of the top Fortune 500. And that's because really to recruit at these universities now, employers need to engage through this platform to be successful. In addition to this fall, we realized that this is great that we work with so many universities, but also what we realized was that the whole point of Handshake was to create a democratic access to jobs. And the schools that don't use Handshake today, their students weren't able to access jobs. And so we kicked off what we call our open network. And so today, across the United States, every single student in the country who has a .edu email address can actually sign up and create a Handshake account. And then you as the employer, you get to decide where are the places that you would like to recruit, what are those universities, or would you like to post this to the entire open network so that you can get the most access. What this also means, though, is that we're the biggest platform in the world for 18 to 22-year-olds. We have the most engaged audience, but this doesn't just mean we have every student. Handshake has every profile of university and every profile of student at every school. And why this is relevant to our conversation today is that Handshake has over 130 universities that we partner with that are called minority serving institutions. Over 50 of those are historically Black colleges, over 20 women's colleges, over 60 Hispanic serving institutions. And so in total, we have over 800,000 students who attend one of these minority serving institutions and over 1 million students who participate in those diversity and inclusion organizations. We saw on the poll just a few minutes ago that a lot of you are working to engage with these diversity and inclusion organizations or organizations on campus in general in order to be able to access the student population. And that's really great, and you can go deep on a few campuses. But if you actually want to get the top talent nationally, Handshake can play that bridge to access all the students that are engaged in those types of organizations across the country. So why does all this even matter? The reason is because since Handshake is the largest platform for 18 to 22-year-olds, it means that we have more data and information around how students interact with jobs than anyone else in the world. And so because of that, specifically today, we'll focus on this Women in Tech cohort. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kristen so that we can talk through some of these myths that we see in Women in Tech and how we've used the data behind the Handshake platform to reassess them.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So just before we dive into the first myth, I think it's always helpful to understand how we collected this data. Like we said, this is from data on our network. So we're looking at what we call one full recruiting cycle. So June 1st, 2018 through May 31st of this year. We're looking at student preferences as measured by volume of applications. So looking at the number of applications, let's say from women within software engineering and development to a certain employer or to a certain industry. And then, of course, we are looking at other industry research to support our data within the network. So let's look at myth number 1. Women don't care about STEM. Sciences, technology, engineering, math. That is absolutely not the case. And from what our first finding shows is that the competitive leadership and communication skills that these women bring to the workplace, those are definitely there, and women are listing those in their profiles. But that's not it. While these women have great, well-rounded skill sets, they also are super well equipped with technical skills, looking at Java, data analysis, Python, SQL. And as you all probably know, these are some of the skills that are the most in demand from you and your employers, and your coworkers today, what you're hiring for, and some of the most marketable skills that women and candidates can actually put on their profile and share with employers that they have this nice, well-rounded skill set.
The second myth is that there just aren't enough qualified women to do the job. So this comes up a lot when we talk about tech and tech-specific roles, engineering roles, that companies say, well, I have to hire all these men because there just aren't enough women. And the good news here is that that gap is closing. Yes, there are more men that actually apply to these engineering roles than women. There are about 78,000 men who applied for software engineering roles and developer roles on Handshake in the last 12 months. But at the same point, this gap between the two is closing significantly. So more than 35,000 women applied for software engineer and development roles over the past 12 months. More than 15,000 applied for data science roles, and more than 9,000 applied to be data engineers. All of these job categories experienced significant leaps from even just looking last year. So this increase of 227% of data engineers, this is actually not meaning necessarily that they studied data engineering, but that they had the skills to ultimately apply for the job. So whenever you hear someone say, okay, there aren't enough qualified women in the field, just show them this chart, because the reality is that there are plenty of women in this field and we're increasing the number every single day. What's more is that about 35% of these applicants are majoring in non-STEM related curriculum. And I'll highlight that again, 35% of the applicants, they don't have a STEM major. And that is really pivotal because there are lots of ways today that students actually can get this skill set without it being their major. And that's what leads us to the next myth.
So you need a computer science degree to be an engineer. Like Katie said, that is absolutely not the case. We do see 35% of applicants majoring in non-STEM majors. So what are these majors? We see business analytics, communications and media studies, marketing, foreign language, English. Again, this is kind of pushing us all to think about how we've historically recruited students and looking at the full picture of a candidate. It is not just about the major. It is not just about the GPA. It is not just about the school. We know that qualified candidates can represent their skills in a number of different ways. And you saw the previous or the 2 myths ago, skills are a huge piece of that. And you really don't need a computer science major to find a career in engineering. I think we shared our backgrounds for a reason. You saw that I studied media and communication, and though I did go into marketing, this shows that like if I chose to take a coding academy on the side or a boot camp, I could easily be an engineer at Handshake instead of a marketer. One of the things I wanted to call out here was something that our VP of Higher Ed and Student Success shared. There's some recent PR that we did along with this Women in Tech report, which you'll get a copy of next week. But Christine Cruz Vergara shared some of her thoughts here around this point, and she shared that more and more college students are discovering the true value of their education. And to my point, that is not defined by their major. So students without STEM degrees are aspiring to work in the technology field, and those students should embrace and lean into those skills and assets, including the ability to synthesize information, think critically, communicate well, and know that those are all highly in-demand skills that you all as employers are looking for. I think the unique perspective that these students bring to the table around problem solving and finding creative solutions is just as valuable to you all as employers as theoretical domain expertise, and definitely deserves to be highlighted. And when you think about what early talent means to you as an employer, is if the skills are there, problem solving skills, technical skills, obviously the stuff that is innate to your business can be taught. And so this provides a really malleable, healthy pipeline to you all where you can focus on hiring whatever it is you're looking for, more women, more underrepresented first-gen students, whatever that is for you as an employer, and kind of look at the student holistically.
The next myth is women and men care about very different things in their workplace. So this looks at students in computer science and tech fields who are majoring in that area. And although you can see that there are some differences, in the top 5 areas that men and women are looking for, 3 of them overlap. The biggest thing that yells out here is managers and mentors matter a lot to this early talent cohort. A manager who's willing to coach, is available, and is someone that they can trust and look up to comes up over and over again as we talk to this early talent population, and it's a strong indicator for them of a thriving workplace. The thing is, as you read these different areas, inspiring leadership, supportive environments, innovative businesses, really what we're seeing here is culture is loud. Leadership, a place where they can learn, and innovation so that they're also growing. So this is a really, really hungry group of individuals that are young, but looking to make an impact and want to be able to be in an environment that you're going to both help them be impactful and grow them while they're there.
And finally, our 5th myth is that only the top tech companies are hiring women in software engineering roles. And again, you can see a list of logos there. So we're looking at, number of applicants to these companies and just companies who take a different approach to hiring women tech talent. You see the New York Times, Wayfair, Disney, Whirlpool, Coca-Cola, and these are probably, the employers you may not expect. It's not all social media giants here. And I think that this is an important thing, and we can see it later who's on the line, but it's an important thing to think about as far as brand goes. So when you look at the New York Times, for instance, they probably don't come to mind as a top tech company, do they? But they have done a lot of work with early talent and how they actually change their brand when they're appealing to tech talent, number one, and tech talent from underrepresented backgrounds. And I think we'll talk about some examples in just a sec, but I think it's a huge example and should be a huge encouragement to those on the line where it's okay if you don't have the big social media tech brand to rely on, because these companies here don't either, and they're all making a huge impact in terms of recruiting and retaining women in tech positions. So for our first example, let's take a look at Cisco. And Cisco is one of our top employers in terms of looking at women within software engineering and developer applicants. And they have done a lot of work in terms of what it takes to really build out the next generation of women leaders at Cisco. They host what's called a Girls in ICT Day, where the employees engage girls kind of the ages, young ages, high school, 13 to 18, through hands-on exposure to the latest technology and connecting them with industry professionals at Cisco. You can see, 300,000 young women across 166 countries. In addition to generating first path early career considerations, Cisco's program helps actually remedy an earlier report which found that girls lose interest in math and science during middle school due to a lack of female mentors. So, not being able to see women or people like you pursuing math and science, and they're able to help kind of combat that by keeping that engagement and continuing to show mentorship in those areas. Another example here is Wayfair. So, I'm sure everyone has probably shopped online with Wayfair before. They're one of the world's largest online destinations for home goods. And they are headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, which is not typically known as a top tech hub. In fact, it's probably better known for healthcare. But I think, again, when we think about brand, this is a great example to lean on, and Wayfair does a really great job of bringing women software engineering and developer candidates to Boston. They're aware of the lack of women's voices in this space and how that can deter future women leaders from pursuing a career in STEM. And that's why they kind of have their talent and engineering teams get together to host women in leadership panel events where college students can come and learn more about real world career journeys, how the women at Wayfair have gotten to where they are now, and ask for advice, listen to an authentic story around what their path was. Because I think, it's an important point to share is like, you can't always achieve or do what you can't see, right? So when I think about my early career, I was fortunate enough to have an amazing woman mentor who showed me what it was like to be a director of marketing, and that was an awesome thing for me to look up to, but that's not the case for everyone. And I think providing students and candidates with more of these opportunities is really powerful, because once you can see that as a student, and as specifically a young student, then you kind of have a North Star to look toward. Another example here we wanted to share is another premium customer of ours, IBM, and they really think about diversity and early talent recruitment holistically. They use their strategy with They sort of have diversity at the foundation of everything they do, experienced and early career, and they are constantly on our top list of employers, whether you're looking at top overall or top by a certain underrepresented group. And how they do that, they're taking a non-traditional approach. Katie explained to you, when we were talking about the Handshake network, some of the historic core school approaches to campus recruiting. So IBM has decided to be campus agnostic. And with that, they've extended their reach digitally. So this doesn't mean sending boots on ground to every campus in the US, to untapped schools and populations. Again, we all here at Handshake have a strong belief that qualified talent is distributed everywhere, and this allows them to tap into that talent, again, no matter what school, what major, what area of the country that talent is. And finally, they're tailoring their events to be a little more specific to the groups that they're trying to recruit. So less career fairs. This doesn't mean they're not going to career fairs completely, but when they do, they show up having pre-engaged the priority student segments they're looking to meet with. But they're doing less of them, and they're doing more personalized events. They're engaging with groups like NSBE to tailor their events to be a little bit more personalized and really show up in the ways that these groups they're trying to recruit would like them to. And finally, our final kind of example and case study here is Whirlpool. So Whirlpool has a really remarkable story to tell around diversity as well. They've really grown their numbers year over year, and you can see in the past year, for example, Whirlpool's team achieved their goal of delivering 20% of university hires from campuses which they do not visit physically. Again, expanding that reach, going out of the core school approach. They've increased their number of women hires from 41 to 51%, and you can see that 51% is now the majority at Whirlpool, which is a huge feat. They've increased their underrepresented group hires to 40%. A lot of the work that we're doing with Whirlpool is to fuel those initiatives and drive these results in their early talent pipeline and university pipeline. And I think this is, an awesome testament to their success, and they've been recognized by Forbes as a best employer for diversity this year.
And the last thing that we'll note is I had the privilege of being at Grace Hopper a few weeks back. I'm sure a handful of you were there as well. And the reality is that we're all taking these micro steps to make an influence on getting more women into tech and more underrepresented individuals into our workplaces. But it's not enough to just go to Grace Hopper and hope that you're going to recruit all those students, or just recruit at one of the HBCUs, or just tax recruiters, really, like a lot of you on the line, I'm sure, to fix these problems. This really is a bigger initiative that takes strong leadership from the top to acknowledge that this is something that they want to invest in. And so the companies that are most successful in driving change within their organization, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion, are those who have support from the most senior leadership at those organizations. And if you're lucky enough to work at one of those companies today, amazing. And if you're not, one of the ways that you can evolve that internally is through having the data that supports why this is important, and you can be a change agent within your organization as well.
With that, we are going to stop and take another poll. So the question here is, what % of your leadership team do women make up? And again, I encourage everyone to be as honest as possible. This is anonymous, but we're just trying to get a sense of the reality here. So let's just take a second and we will launch the poll. Okay, so let's take a look here at the results. We're seeing majority in the 1 to 25% area, but interestingly, just as many have about 0 as they do the 76 to 100%. I think what this is telling us, and shouldn't be news to anyone, but there's a long way to go here, right? And I'm sure everyone has taken a look at the McKinsey Lean-In study, or at least heard about it, and there's really that missing rung when it comes to women in management and sort of that middle career position. So I think, it's all on us to help alleviate that and help really lift women up into those positions, because we know that that is the way that, all of us are going to have more women leadership at each of our companies. Okay, so just to close here, in terms of how to better engage women candidates within your technical roles, A couple tips, but I think hopefully everyone has kind of taken some of the takeaways throughout. Create opportunities early on. Again, women, and specifically young women, cannot exactly pursue what they don't know. So that example of Cisco, for instance, is a great one in showing what those opportunities are very early in a woman's life. Making your job descriptions more inclusive. I know Katie has some examples of words that she tries to avoid.
Yeah, I saw some really funny examples the other day when you say like a ninja coder or someone who wrestles different problems to the ground. Like sometimes language like that in your actual job descriptions can create gender bias in who actually feels like that's a job for them. So just thinking about the way that you're writing job descriptions so that if you do want to attract all different backgrounds of individuals, how can you make sure that the way you're explaining roles also says that to the candidates?
And also, just a tip here is we have a couple of resources as far as how you can create more inclusive job descriptions, and we will follow up with that in our follow-up with this recording afterward. But finally, communicate pathways to leadership, including mentorship. One of the most amazing things, again, as I had early in my career, was mentorship, and this doesn't just have to be women. I had also a number of amazing male mentors, and I would say here at Handshake, we have men on our leadership team down to the IC level who support the women here. So again, communicating this, sharing what is available at your company, and those opportunities, not just for growth and development as far as like career path goes, but also for connecting with other people, connecting with mentors. This helps a lot. Again, we want to provide the information to these young candidates as much as possible. Okay, so with that, we're going to pause and see if there were any questions that didn't get answered along the way. So just bear with us as we look through some of your questions.
Okay, great. So the first question that was asked says, my employer has no women on the leadership team. What can I do to start engaging students from different backgrounds, given that, especially women? So the reality is, I think our advice here would be genuine about this. I mean, this is real, and as you saw from the poll, you're not alone. There are lots of leadership teams that currently have no women on them. But the reality is that you can still tell the story of your organization. What does your company have to offer young talent? Okay, it's not a woman on the leadership team, but there's probably not 0 women at your company. And also, what do you have beyond that? What experience are you giving young talent? How are you going to cultivate and develop their skills? Again, the other thing that I'll note is when we talk about mentorship and leadership, that doesn't just need to be individuals from the same gender. I actually, early in my career, when I worked in finance, I started out as a bond trader at Goldman Sachs, and I was the only woman in the entire fixed income department, and I was the only woman on my team, but that didn't stop me from joining. And I think I learned a lot in that role. I don't regret it, and really the best mentor of my life was somebody who I met in that seat as well. His name's Jesse, and he's been a reference for me for every job I've ever gotten since I was 22 years old. And so the reality there is that no matter where you're starting from today, just creating pathways so that you're ready to support those individuals as you bring them in. And hopefully over time, that those who you want to incorporate into your organization, you can also show them that there's some of them already there. But that takes time as well. So that's kind of step 1, is making sure there's mentorship regardless of gender.
So we got another question that says, just to our last point, how can we make the job descriptions more inclusive? Katie shared a couple of things just in terms of gendered words. Again, we have some resources that we'd be happy to share that has a full list of these. Some other things that we do and encourage our employer partners to do here at Handshake is use the word you throughout your job description. So as someone is reading this, they can read it as, this is what I will be doing at the company. We also encourage people to include language in there that says something around, if you don't feel you're qualified for this role, we still encourage you to apply. But yeah, I think there's a number of things and phrases, euphemisms that we all use in our day-to-day, and those can be very limiting to some folks. So we will follow up with that resource, and I encourage everyone to take a look at it.
The next question that we got said, how can Handshake help recruit diversity into my organization? So diversity means a lot of things. I'll start there. I think it means diversity of thought, it means race, it means gender, it means experience. And so when we take the big picture of that word, it can really be sliced and diced in lots of ways. But the reality is that when we talk about those who are bringing diversity, often it references to those from underrepresented backgrounds. And the first thing to be able to do that is really to identify where they are. So on Handshake, you can do that. You can identify minority-serving institutions as one place. The second thing is you can identify organizations that students are a part of because they're from an underrepresented background, like organizations for women in STEM, or organizations for those of different backgrounds and different majors that are not typical of what has been happening historically. The last piece there that I'll say around identification can be interest. And this really builds on this almost clash of majors versus experience. We see a lot in the tech field that students will take these boot camps on the side, or they'll take Coursera courses, or they'll do something to really increase their technical talent, even though they're a communications major. And so through Handshake, students actually not only tell you what they do and what they study, but they also tell you what they're interested in. So if you wanted to actually find, let's say, women in non-traditional majors who have qualifications, whether it be interests or skills that are technical, you can also do that through Handshake's premium partnership, where you can identify this population of students. The second step from identifying is actually proactively communicating with them. So historically, as employers, we used to post jobs and then hope students applied to them. We like to joke around here that that's the post and pray model. And that creates a lot of inequity because students don't always know where to go for this next opportunity. Especially, you can think of how disadvantaged a first generation student might be in this capacity. If they're the first student to ever go to college, they don't have someone in their family who can talk through that college to career journey with them. So because of that, you being able to say, okay, this is the skill set I'm looking for in an employee. Let me identify all the students that meet that, and now let me communicate with them and tell that student personally why they are a good fit for this role. And so Handshake actually does enable you to do that. And then that last step is being able to therefore drive them to apply to your roles. So Handshake has something called segments and campaigns, to throw out some buzzwords at you, but it enables us to create cohorts of students, profiles that fit our needs, and then communicate with them to say, I think you'd be a great fit for our role, and actually get yourself a pipeline of students that are very representative of all types of backgrounds, but share the skill set that you're looking for.
And I think the last question we've received is, my company hasn't thought much about diversity. Where is a good place to start? So what I would say here is, maybe before even starting, I encourage you or any connections that you have in management or leadership to actually make this a priority. Unfortunately, the sad reality is, if it isn't a priority, like Katie said, across the organization, it won't get the resources, attention, and support that we all truly feel it needs. So number one is start there. Number two, I think, and this, might sound a little too relevant to what we do here at Handshake, but I really do think starting with early talent is the best place. And, this can be something as easy as just changing how you're targeting your schools. If you use Handshake, which, I think everyone here does, open up your job posting to, an area, a region, if you're comfortable, across the U.S. And like Katie talked through, there are ways of doing this and becoming really targeted in that approach. So you might say, hey, we've now, established that hiring a more diverse early talent pool is a priority to us. We are going to start with this one job, and we are going to use it as a pilot. I then encourage you to use the data that you get from your pipeline and from your applications on Handshake as a point to kind of socialize internally and show what the results are. We're confident that you will see a more diverse pipeline there. And then, use that as a talking point and as a data point to go do more internally. Of course, we're talking a lot about recruiting here, but like I said in the beginning, retention, inclusion in an organization is very, very critical here. So employee resource groups, there might be, if you haven't thought too much about it, there might be, people who have to be the first, and communicating that to them, again, as long as you're honest and transparent, is an okay thing to do. But I think that's one thing that, you want to get alignment internally before kind of going out and testing something, lest you don't get the resources and support it deserves. Great. Well, with that, it looks like the questions have stopped coming in. Like I mentioned, we will send a follow-up of this recording later today, and then do expect to hear from us next week with the full Women in Tech report that goes through some of this data and even some more. And if you do have any questions about what Katie or I chatted through, how Handshake Premium can help you think through this, if you want to just talk about your diversity recruiting strategy, feel free to email us. employers@joinhandshake.com is the best place to do that. And we hope everyone has a great Thursday.